So, my dear friends, my dear brothers and sisters, it's a joy for me to be with you this morning to share with you on some aspects on the life of Saint Therese of the Child Jesus. Um, in a personal manner, as you have heard, that I would frequent your shrine here after my classes in LST, in Loyola School of Theology. I would be passing by to pray to Saint Therese in this church, or whenever I would be going somewhere here in Rizal for a talk or for a meeting, I would make it sure that I would drop by your church unannounced. So, yung Paris Place nyo before and today, takot kapag nakita ko, kaya hindi ako nagpapaalam. But I would pray and spend time to pray. In a personal manner, Saint Therese has been so influential to me from high school until now. My relationship with Saint Therese of the Child Jesus originated when I was in high school in Guadalupe Minor Seminary in Makati. I was still 11 years old at that time. So don't imagine how small was I that time. If you can see that I have not grown that enough, don't imagine how little was I at that time. But it was at 11 years old, in 11 years old, that I came to know Saint Therese of the Child Jesus through the Carmelite Sisters of Genaro. I was, when it was the 50th year of the monastery at that time. And that's why today they are celebrating this year 100 years. So that was 50 years ago. Don't calculate how old I am now. So that was 50 years ago when I started to come closer to Saint Therese. And all throughout the history of my vocation, Saint Therese has been essentially part of my perseverance in vocation. And until now, I cannot see the meaning of my vocation as a priest and as a Christian without the help of Saint Therese of the Child Jesus. That's why I'm very happy to be with you this morning to share with you what I have learned from Therese. This might not be that academic, although I am a professor in many seminaries and universities on liturgy, as has been announced. But this will not be an academic conference. This will be more of a personal sharing of how Therese has shaped me in my vocation as a priest and as a Christian. And I think all of us will, you are here because you are also a friend of Therese, and that's why we have a common friend. And this gathering is really a gathering of friends of Therese. As Therese has desired to gather legions of little souls, no? Diba? At the end of the life of Therese, she desired to gather legions of little souls who would follow the little way, her little way. So all of us are drawn to Therese, and what keeps us together is the little way of Therese. So, this is really, for me, a personal thanksgiving to a friend who has been with me all throughout my life as a seminarian and as a priest. So, I will try to go with you through the life of Therese and try to help you and even myself as I share to you to look into myself and how Therese speaks to us even until today. You know that before Pope Francis died, he issued an apostolic letter entitled "C'est la confiance." It is confidence, and it is dedicated to Therese. Pope Francis is also especially devoted to Therese, no? Even as a one who was being formed as a Jesuit, no? And then in his life as a priest, as a Jesuit, and as Bishop of Argentina. He has developed, that's why that beautiful, I hope that you can read that also. It summarizes who Therese is today. And if there is something that the shrine should promote, the national shrine should promote, would be the summary of teaching of Pope Francis on Therese. I think that is a challenge for you to read that and to meditate on that and to pray over it and to see how it affects you and will affect you and your national shrine as you promote the devotion of Therese in the national scale. So, that letter of Pope Francis is very important, and it is a summary of the whole doctrine of Therese. You know, marami kasi ang, yes, many are attracted to Therese, but Therese is more than the sweet roses. Therese is more than the doing things with great intentionality of love and everything. Therese is more than that. There is a whole doctrine of Saint Therese that makes the gospel resound and becomes a relevant teaching of today to all Christians. And that's why you will understand why Saint Therese proclaimed in 2001 by Saint Pope John Paul II, Doctor of the Church. Doctor here does not mean healer. Doctor here is in the sense of Latin. Doctor means teacher. Teacher. You see that Saint Augustine is a doctor of the church. Saint Ambrose is a doctor of the church. No? There are many great theologians, great figures in the church, doctors of the church. Why? Because their teachings left a great impact in the reflection of the doctrine of the church universally. Sa buong mundo, hindi lang sa Pilipinas, hindi lang sa Roma, kundi sa buong mundo. Like for example, the teaching and the writings of St. Augustine. Until today, we draw so many reflections and enlightenment from the teaching of St. Augustine. Kaya, when we teach theology, we always go back to the reflections and teachings of St. Augustine. And he is a doctor of a church. Therese of the Child Jesus is the youngest of all the doctors of the church. And when Pope St. John Paul II declared St. Therese of the Child Jesus a doctor, St. John Paul II is telling us, St. Therese has a universal teaching. It was not only in the 19th century that her teaching was relevant. Even until today, her teaching, the science of love, that's why the bull on the declaration, on the doctoral declaration of St. Therese is entitled Science of Love. Scientia Amoris. The science of love. And the science of love is the heart of the teaching of St. Therese of the Child Jesus. And this has a universal impact, not only in Europe, not only in Africa, but in all of the churches all over the world, to all Christians of every age and of every time. That's why the teaching of Therese and Therese of the Child Jesus is a witness that the gospel is still alive today. Huwag niyo kalilimutan. Therese witnesses to us that the gospel can live even until today. Pwede nating isabuhay ang ebanghelyo magpahanggang ngayon. Kahit na anong uri ng iyong estado sa buhay, pinakamataas ka man sa lipunan o pinakamababa ka sa lipunan, ang ebanghelyo ay totoo sa bawat Kristiyano. And Therese of the Child Jesus witnessed to us to the power of the gospel, that the gospel is a reality even until today. Ang gospel, naririnig ninyo, no? Pinag-aaralan ninyo, pinagdarasalan natin. But above all, the gospel is Jesus Christ, whom we live until today. Isinasabuhay natin magpahanggang ngayon. the power of that gospel. And therefore, we should keep in mind that the rest of the child Jesus is not just for the roses, no? Oo, ang intercession ni Therese is very powerful, no? Natatandaan ninyo, no? Yung mga storya ng World War First, when Therese was still being, was still ano pa na siya noon, venerable pa, hindi pa siya beatified at that time. How many soldiers were attesting that Therese was appearing to them on the battleground, saving soldiers who were about to die during that time. So many millions of testimonies of the power of the intercession of Therese. And until today, I think all of you would attest to that in one way or another, all the prayers that you have addressed to Therese have been presented to the Father through Jesus Christ and has been given to us. The powerful intercession of Saint Therese. Yeah, totoo yun. Pero at the heart of this is the doctrine, the teaching of Therese that makes the gospel shine and help us to understand the gospel. Okay? So, we will go to that, and I hope that that is what you will remember more than anything in the life of Therese of the Child Jesus, no? So, let us look into, first of all, the childhood of Saint Therese of the Child Jesus, no? So, Therese of the Child Jesus was born to a parents who were so religious, Zélie and Louis Martin. Louis wanted to become a monk. He was refused in the monastery because he did not know Latin. Providentially. Kasi kung natanggap siya, wala tayong Therese ngayon. Di ba? Providentially. He was rejected to the monastery. Zélie wanted to become a nun. She was also rejected. And thanks be to God, or else Therese would not be. One day, Zélie and Louis met on a bridge in Alanson. Nagkatingin at umuwi ng mag-asawa. Today is Valentine's Day, no? And it's so beautiful that you are spending your Valentine's with Therese, no? Nung hinatid ako ni Brother Francis, tinundo ako ni Brother. Ang dami naming dinaanan, lahat nagtitinda sa kalsada ng mga roses at mga balloons. And talaga namang, hitik na hitik ang Valentine's Day sa Pilipinas. At sa Pilipinas na naman may ganyan. Ay, yung mga sa inyo, yung mga nakapag-abroad na, makikita ninyo na sa US, hindi naman sila crazy about Valentine's Day. Ako po, I lived in Rome, and when I studied in Rome for 5 years, never ko nakita na ang Valentine's Day was given time by the Europeans. Sa Pilipinas lang may ganyan. Talagang ano tayo. Kasi sabi nila, it's the day of reparation of men to their wives and to their girlfriends. Day of reparation. Hindi ko na-i-explain kung bakit. No? Kaya patok na patok sa Pilipinas ang Valentine's Day. Ano yan? Araw ng pagbabayad puri ng mga kalalakihan sa kanilang asawa. So, hindi na natin pag-uusapan kung bakit. Pero, that moment that Zélie and Louis met was the change in their life. They lived together. Nung una, they wanted to make a monastery and a convent in their house. Pinagalitan sila ng pari nila, no? Kasi, mag-asawa kayo, hindi kayo madre at pare. So, they wanted to. But they lived their faith life. And at that time, intindihin niyo ito. Akala natin, it was easy for them to live their faith because of the impact of the French Revolution. Yung French Revolution kasi talagang it destroyed the faith of France. Yeah. Maraming paring pinatay, mga maradiring pinatay, mga simbahang isinarado dahil galit ang gobyerno sa simbahan because of the monarchy. And it affected so many Christians and Catholics in France at that time. And that's why you will see many were indifferent to the faith at that time. You would see that the atmosphere in France at that time is not like today, no? Here in the Philippines, nakakasimba kayo ng maayos, hindi kayo kinukutya ng ibang relihiyon, ganyan. But at that time, it was difficult. It was difficult. Although they had the freedom at that time, but you will see the antagonism against the church. Yung paglaban sa simbahan. And that's why the fruit and of the French Revolution was so strong at that time. And Celie and Louis tried to build a Christian family. Their faith mattered in family life. And when Therese was born, she was born the last, the youngest in the family. There were many deaths because at that time, infant mortality was prevalent, no? Siyam sila magkakapatid, makikita ninyo, yung 5 ay namatay. No? Ang daming namatay. 4 na yun namatay. No? 4 ay namatay. No? Kaya doon kung pupunta kayo sa Lisieux, merong ipiname si Saint Therese na isang chasuble. Piname niya yung chasuble. Doon sa chasuble, may mga lilies. Yung lilies na nakabukas, silang buhay na magkakapatid. At yung lilies na maliliit na buko pa lamang, yun yung mga kapatid niyang namatay. So, nakikita nila. And it was traumatic for the mother. It was traumatic for the mother and for the children, no? Yung sunod-sunod na pagkamatay ng magkakapatid, no? And that's why you will understand also that Zélie died of cancer, breast. And it was difficult at that time. Also, to raise children was difficult because Saint Therese nga, when she was born, she was sickly. And that's why she needed a surrogate mother because Celine could not feed her with her milk. And that's why she was entrusted to a surrogate mother, katulong nila. And she needed to be sent to a place outside of Alanson to be taken care of the household, yung surrogate mother, and to be fed with the milk of the surrogate mother. Because Therese would die. The mother could not feed her with her milk. And it was difficult at that time, even to raise children. No? So, ang daming namamatay na mga bata because of many health problems at that time. So, Therese grew up also fragile. And she was brought back to their house only when she was already healthy enough to return to their house. So, you will see that Therese lived a normal family life, but the family was really Christian. Everything revolved around prayer and everything revolved around the church. Therese of the Child Jesus was loved by the sisters, Pauline, Marie, Celine, and Therese. She was the apple of the eye of the family. And the father called her princess, his princess. So, ang tawag naman ni Therese sa kanyang tatay ay my king, the king of France. Le roi de France. Tawag niya, my king. And so you see how Therese was deeply loved and lavishly loved by the family. And because of that atmosphere of love, you will see that Therese would grow also with certain strength of the family. Something would happen, a difficulty and a problem in the life of Therese would happen in childhood, which would affect her even in adulthood. And that was the death of her mother. The death of her mother. When the mother died, everybody was in the room except Therese. She could not bear it. And when she was asked to enter the room of the mother after she died, it was a difficult thing for Therese. She felt a complete loss. And psychologically, she would be affected by this. And when the mother died, the eldest sister, Pauline, was there, and Therese told Pauline, "You will be my mother." And it was not a declaration, kasi ninang niya din yung kanyang, yung ate niya. Sabi niya, "You will be my mother," to replace the mother. And it was okay. A replacement for the mother, yes. And she was taken care by Pauline. But the problem again would come. Pauline would enter the monastery, and she did not let Therese. The pain of the death of the mother was still with Therese. And she only heard that Therese and that Pauline would enter Carmel to be a contemplative nun only the night when Pauline would be leaving the family. And it jolted again Therese. Psychologically, she entered into depression and even neurosis. Kaya yung mental health na problema natin ngayon, Therese underwent the mental health problem at that time in childhood. So when Pauline left, she felt orphan again. She could not go to school. She could not stand other people. Pag nasa eskwela siya, she would just be crying. And she could not even, yung poor academic performance niya at that time, it all affected her. Kahit yung pagsulat niya, psychologists were examining yung handwriting niya, they were saying that Therese was in terrible mental health deficiency at that time. And so, sabi nga dun sa autobiography niya, sabi niya, I would cry. Iiyak ako kasi umiiyak ako. Ewan ko kung naintindihan ninyo. I am crying because I am crying. Bakit siya umiiyak? Pag tinanong siya, bakit ka umiiyak? Kasi umiiyak ako. Ang dahilan ng pag-iyak niya ay dahil umiiyak lang siya. And she could not get out of that side. She became so sensitive. Tatandaan ninyo that all of this will be broken on the grace of Christmas. Diba? She was the apple of the eye of everybody, but deep within her, she was suffering, even mentally. Kaya, nasabihin natin, no? Ang mga santo talaga, di ba, no? San Agustin, nakikita natin na, wow, no? Fantastic, no? Ang gagaling, personality-wise, walang walang crack, walang In the rest, you will see, she started in a difficult situation. Kaya the grace of Christmas, when she was a child, would change a lot. Ano yun? One Christmas, every Christmas, kasi katulad ng mga siguro sa mga apo ninyo, anak ninyo, pag Christmas, maglalagay ng, ewan ko ba, during our time, no? Maglalagay ng socks, ng medyas, no? Na malalaki, para doon ilalagay yung mga ewan ko kung ginagawa pa yan ngayon, hindi ko alam, no? Doon ilalagay yung mga regalo para sa mga bata. And Therese would always do that, Christmas after Christmas. And would put it in the fireplace in Le Buissonnet. And when one Christmas, she put that. And the father, Louis, was so tired after the Christmas Eve Mass, was so tired. And when they entered the house, he saw yung medyas doon sa fireplace. Ang sabi ng tatay ni Therese, "This would be the last." And Therese heard it. Anak ko, that would be a cause of floods of tears for Therese. Hearing that from his father. And so her sister, Marie, tried to cover her and to protect her so that she would not be affected by the declaration of the father. But Therese, on that evening, felt something within her. The grace of God as if flooding her heart, overcoming that sensitiveness. And she went up the stairs, and she tells us in the autobiography, like a giant conquering oneself. That was the beginning of the conversion of Therese, that Christmas grace. But it was the initial conversion. It would be tried again. And she would be converted all along. And the fruit of this conversion, that she would get out of herself. Yung sensitiveness niya, and all of this, you would see, she would be able to, little by little, overcome. And she tells us in the autobiography, when I began to think of others, it was then that I felt happiness began in my heart. So, pagkatapos nun, meron siyang experience na sinishare sa atin. Sabi niya, one morning, my father was reading the newspaper, Le Figaro. Sa bahay nila, bawal magbasa ng newspaper ang mga anak. Ang tatay lang ang nagbabasa. To keep them away from malicious news or what. So, to sanitize the children, the daughters. And when the father was reading the newspaper, he fell asleep. Katulad ng iba sa inyo ngayon, natutulog na. Hindi dahil sa newspaper. But bumagsak yung newspaper. The newspaper fell. And Therese, I do not know what happened, but Therese began to be intrigued by the news and went to the newspaper and read a news item. And the news item was about a criminal who was about to be executed through guillotine, the beheading. And the name of the criminal is Francini. Francini killed a socialite woman in Paris. A socialite killing. And he was found guilty. And when Therese read the newspaper that this man was condemned to be beheaded through guillotine, but the man, and the news is telling that the man is unrepentant. Ayaw magsisi. Kahit na pinuntahan na ng pari dun sa kanyang prison cell, the man refused the priest and did not want to talk to the priest and was unrepentant. And with that news, Therese was moved to pray for Francini and offered sacrifices and prayed daily for the conversion of Francini. Hindi niya nakita si Francini, nabasa niya na. And you know, again, during the day that Francini would be beheaded, he was already kneeling at the guillotine to be beheaded, and the priest was there. Immediately, Francini took the crucifix of the priest and kissed it 3 times before he was beheaded. When Therese knew this and read this again in the newspaper, she was so filled with consolation. God heard her prayers for Francine. It was so moving. A simple act of prayer for others. And this was one of the effects of the conversion of the little Therese. She was still a young kid at this time. A child offering prayers and sacrifices for the conversion of a criminal. And Therese said, Francine was her spiritual child. So, you will see that this will go on in Therese. And you will see that Therese knew well the presence of Jesus in her life. Ito sana huwag niyong kalilimutan to, my dear brothers and sisters. One of the things, if you read the autobiography of Saint Therese, the story of a soul, after reading it, you will feel that there is one thing that weaves all the accounts of Therese. And what is that? The presence of Jesus. Jesus is not something in the book. Jesus is not something that I tell you. Jesus is not just something, an imagination. As you read the story of a soul, you will feel Jesus is alive in Therese. That's why, understand this also, my dear friends. When Therese of the Child Jesus wrote the autobiography, it was not first she wrote the autobiography and then learned from it. No, the autobiography of the Child Jesus, of Saint Therese of the Child Jesus, is the fruit of her life and encounter with Jesus. Iba yun, di ba? Pagka kayo, halimbawa, may isusulat kayo, reflection ninyo. Natutunan ninyo, kaya isusulat ninyo. Pero, it will just be, after that, you will deepen your experience of that which you write. But for Therese, it's different. She has experienced it, and then the writing is just a confirmation of her experiences of Jesus. And that's why the autobiography of Saint Therese of the Child Jesus is filled with a conviction that Christ is not a personality of the past. Ito intindihin ninyo. The term that I use is a personality of the past. Ano yung personality? Like for example, Jose Rizal is a personality of our history. You studied in your schools, in high school or in college, what he has written. He is a personality of the past. Donald Trump is a personality, a crazy one. Is a personality. Tatanungin ko kayo, kakilala niyo ba siya? Sabihin niyo sa akin, yes, Father. Nakasalamuhan niyo na siya? Hindi pa. Sabihin ko sa inyo, mahal niyo ba siya? Sabihin ko, hindi ko nga siya. He's a personality. He's out there. You may know something about him, but you do not know him. Magkaiba yung sabi, alam ka at kakilala. Yun yung ibig sabihin ng personality. May alam ka, pero hindi mo siya kakilala. Jesus is not a personality. He is a person. And we see that in the autobiography of Saint Therese. That Jesus is a person alive. And everything in Therese is affected by that presence of Jesus. Ang ganda nga, minsan, she made a reference to explain that presence of Jesus. Sabi niya, when her sisters would bring her to bed every night, the sisters, yung si Marie o kaya si Celine, pag iano na siya, ilalagay na siya sa kama, papatay na yung ilaw. And she would begin to cry because it's dark. And she would begin to cry. And tapos, habang umiiyak siya, hindi niya alam yung kapatid niyang babae, si Marie o kaya si Celine, would still be there in the room. And the sister would tell, Therese, I am here. And everything will be changing. Everything will be changing. Pag narinig niya na yung kapatid niya in the midst of darkness, kahit takot na takot siya pag narinig niya, Therese, I am here, hindi na siya iiyak. Sabi niya, this is presence. Nawala ba yung dilim? Nandun pa rin. Pero, andun yung presence. Kahit na madilim, dahil alam niyang nando doon, napapanatag siya. That is also the same with us, di ba? Kapag si Jesus, something of a personality lang, kaya nga, when can God be absent in our life? When can Jesus be absent in your life? Never. Pero, oftentimes we think that Jesus is absent, and that's why we commit sin. When we make ourselves believe that Christ is not present, that is the time we fall into sin. The presence of Jesus is so real in Therese. Everything changes in her life because of this presence. Kaya, makikita ninyo, kaya, di ba, many of you would understand Therese teaching us little things, doing little things for love of Jesus, no? Because that is based on the conviction and the experience of Christ truly being alive in her life. And that's why she desires Jesus. And with this, you will see this would prepare her. Therese needed also conversion, childhood to get out of the shell of, and the worst symptom of this sickness was yung Our Lady of the Smile. No? When Our Lady smiled on her, she was really in trouble. They did not know what was happening to her. So and the smile of Our Lady brought her also the cure that has begun in the Christmas conversion of Therese. So, you will see that all of this, especially today, when we talk of a saint, akala natin ang saint, perfect in everything. Sino ba sa atin dito ang walang flaws sa kanyang personality? Kahit na yung nagsasalita sa inyo, marami ding hindi maayos sa buhay. Who among us? And Therese is witnessing to us that sanctity is not because there is nothing to be changed in us. Sanctity is that which God still changes in us. Yung kabanalan ay hindi sapagkat wala nang babaguhin ng Diyos sa iyo. Kung wala nang babaguhin ng Diyos sa iyo, hindi mo na kailangan si Kristo. Kabanalan natin ay sapagkat until now, the Lord can change us. And the humility to understand what it is. So, that is. So, the rest of the child Jesus really was very determined. And that's why her desire to enter Carmel grew within her. And she would do everything to enter Carmel, even when she was still 15 years old. You know, at that time, Carmel was very strict, no? Talagang yung life sa pagiging mongha was really very strict. But that's why they were afraid that she would not be able to comply with the life. Kasi 15 years old pa lang eh. And that's why they were dissuading her to change her mind. But she would even go to the Pope to ask for permission. To ask for permission. And finally, she was able to get the permission. And you will see that dalawa na yung kapatid niya sa Carmel, sa pangatlo siya. Yung isang kapatid niya, gusto din pumasok, si Celine. But she could not enter because when Therese entered Carmel, somebody has to take care of the father. Somebody has to take care of the father. And so, Therese entered Carmel. And you know, Therese was very ordinary. And later on, Therese of the Child Jesus would be given charge of the novices. Novices. And dun sa kanyang pagtulong para hubugin yung mga novices, she would be teaching them something to the novices. Alam niyo naman, sa monastery, ilang madre lang naman sila, parang 15 o 14 lang sila dun sa monastery. Mga babae pa. No? So, pag may ginawa ka, alam lahat ng lahat. Marami ding marites sa loob. So, nung nagtuturo si Saint Therese dito sa mga novices, ilang novices, pero kakaiba siyang tinuturo na kumakalat doon sa monastery. She is teaching them something. And ito yung hindi, kaya yung autobiography was written by Therese. Kasi ni-request ng kanyang kapatid na si Pauline, who was the prioress of the monastery, that she write her autobiography. And yung itinuturo niya doon sa mga novices. That's why, if you read the autobiography, manuscript C, which is chapter 9, manuscript C is the explanation of the doctrine of the science of love. That is manuscript C. She explains to us what is the science of love. And what is the science of love? Lahat ng totoo naman yun. Yung roses and everything in Therese, the sweetie things about Therese. Totoo naman yan. Pero, let us look into what she teaches us and the science of love. And what is the science of love? That is from the from the letter of St. John. God's love is this: when we were yet sinners, He loved us first. This is the science of love. When you talk, especially today, Valentine's Day, you talk of love, Hollywoodish love. Kahapon, pagkatapos ko magmisa sa Rockwell nung hapon, kasama ko yung mga sakristan. Nagkumain kami ng dinner. Yung mga sakristan ko, high school to. Mga ito, grade 11 and 12. No? So may mga girlfriend na. Nag-uusap-usap sila kung ano ibibigay sa mga girlfriend nila. No? So sabi ko, mga walang ya kayo. Dito niyo pa pinag-uusapan yan. Sabi ko sa kanila. Nag-uusap-usap sila. No? Ganyan, no? Ano yun? Sila, no? To please the beloved, they have to impress the beloved with what they could give the beloved, the loved one. Diba? Yung isa, nag-iisip na mga Ecuadorian roses. No? Magkano ngayon Ecuador? 550. Nakita ko dun sa Rockwell. Isang bukong ganyan lang. No? Sabi ko, 550? No? Ilang na yan, no? Ilang almost a bucket of KFC na yan. No, pero ganito. If we want to prove our love, we have to impress the loved one. Ako ang gagawa. But the Bible tells us, even if we cannot prove anything, God has loved us first. This is where Therese begins. She was looking for a way how to arrive at sanctity. Paano maging banal, ang sabi niya. Paano maging totoo kay Jesus. At that time, nung panahon ni Therese, bawal na silang magbasa ng Biblia. They did not own a Bible, yung mga madre. Because at that time, very strict ang simbahan. Kasi pag nagbasa ka ng Biblia, magkaroon ka ng wrong interpretation. Kaya at that time, pinagbabawal pa kahit sa mga religious to read. And so, how did the Therese able to read and to take this and quote this in manuscript C? Nung pumasok yung kapatid niyan si Celine, nung namatay na yung tatay, pumasok na, finally si Celine, she is the artist among all the sisters. No? Siya yung kumuha ng mga litrato ni Therese. Makikita niyo yung mga nakadisplay. Kinuha yun ni Celine. At that time, yung camera, yung pumuputok pa na, na kinakailangan painitin pa ng ilang siguro 10 minutes. Kaya may picture si Therese na nakaluhod siya, and at that time, she was suffering already in tuberculosis. No? Nakaluhod siya, hirap na siya. Ang tagal mag-init ng camera. So, yung no? It was Celine. And when Celine entered Carmel, she brought with her a notebook where she wrote biblical passages. Biblical passages. So ito yung naging Bible ni Saint Therese. And when she opened that notebook, the first thing that caught her attention was from Proverbs chapter 9. Kung sino ang dukha at maliit, lumapit sa akin. And this is, you will read this in the autobiography. Whoever is little, let him come to me. Proverbs chapter 9. At saka yung susunod, Isaiah chapter 66. Like a mother will carry a child and bring to her lap and feed the child. In this time, Therese is confronted with her weaknesses. Madaming inability si Saint Therese. Isa sa mababasa ninyo. And that's why this was taken out of the autobiography. Yung first edition ng autobiography ni Therese was sanitized. Kasi merong mga isinulat si Therese na hindi pang santa. Ano yan? During the time of Therese, the monastery in Lisieux is in Normandy, north of France. And Normandy is always cold. Laging malamig. Kahit summer, malamig. Walang heater sa monastery. Ang may heater lang ay yung kanilang recreation room at saka, and at the time, the heater is not electric, it was manual. And that's why, and the refectory, I think, yung kanilang mga kwarto, yung kanilang cell, walang heating. And it was always cold. That's why Therese did not have enough sleep. All throughout the night, she would be struggling with cold. And at that time, they were only given one blanket. And that's why all throughout the night, she would be struggling with the cold. And this would leave her sleepless. Kaya naiintindihan niyo, bakit tuberculosis ang sakit niya? Bakit tuberculosis ang sakit niya? She suffered from sleepless nights because of cold. Kaya nung naging novice mistress siya, she made it sure her novices would have enough blankets. Ano epekto nito, Father? Di ba the Carmelites were required 2 hours of prayer, silent prayer, 1 in the morning and 1 in the evening, afternoon. They were required to have silent prayer 2 hours each day. And during the prayer, she would just be sleeping. She wrote that in her autobiography. During prayer time, she would just be drooping. Ewan ko kung nabasa niyo yung poem of the little bird. The little bird na gustong makalipad ng malayo at mataas, pero could not. Kaya dumating yung eagle, and the eagle is the one that brought her the little bird. And sometimes the little bird would fall from the eagle because the little bird is sleeping. That is. And they took this away from edited this in the first edition of the Story of a Soul. Because they said, nakakahiya. Santa natutulog pag nagdadasal. But you see, she was just this because of a problem during the night. She was not able to sleep. And in the chapel, in the choir, it was hidden. She was not sleeping because nagparty siya the whole night. Or natutulog siya kasi gusto niya lang matulog. She could not help it. Baka sabihin niya naman, Father, may reason na tama. National Shrine of St. Therese ito, ha? Baka naman makilala kayo sa pagtulog habang nagmimisa. parang yung isang pari namin nung I was still a seminarian, ang laki-laki niya. No? Pagka nagsiserve ako sa kanya noon, kapag kasimbang gabi, hindi ba sa simbang gabi, inaawit yung gloria. Pag yung papuri, no? Pag inaawit na yung papuri, mauupo siya. Antukin siya. Pag naupo, talagang matutulog. Matutulog. Nung inawit na yung gloria, nakakatulog. Naghihinig pa. Nung tapos na yung papuri, ginigising ko na. Sabi ko, Father, tapos na po. Alam niyo, sagot niya sa akin, ipaulit mo, ipaulit mo. Gusto pa isang lamp. No. How can it be that the saints, and that's why in the first edition of the Story of the Soul, this was deleted. It is only now that they brought it back. She was beset with this. Kaya nga, makikita niyo din sa Story of a Soul. Akala nila si Saint Therese was walking in ecstasy and always prim and proper and everything. Sabi niya, nung si Celine was telling her, I envy you, my dear little sister, because you seem to be always in good shape with the Lord Jesus Christ. Sabi niya, no, my dear sister. Sabi niya, I see my weaknesses and my flaws. And even if I see this, I am not discouraged. I make this something to cry out to the Lord to help me out of my weaknesses. But even this please the Lord because I am able in all humility to offer this even to Him. Kasi akala natin, kaya tayo banal dahil champion na tayo. Kahit dito sa inyong parokya, no? Kahit na makikita natin, yung kabanalan ni Saint Therese is not because she was perfect. And she was the champion in the community. Sinasabi niya nga din sa manuscript C, sabi niya, merong isang mongha na kasama nila na ang pangalan ni Saint Teresa of Saint Augustine. Sabi niya, nakasulat doon, talaga namang ayaw na ayaw niya doon sa madreng yun. No? Kasi everything in her is a cause of dislike for her. Doon sa madreng. Pag nakikita niya, talaga namang nagkisip. Talaga pa. Diba, kahit naman sa parokya, may ganyan, no? Makikita mo pa lang yung anino, naku, Diyos ko, naghahalo na ang balat sa tinalupan. Diba? Sa parokya, ganyan. Si Therese also experienced that. Meron siyang displeasure for a certain sister. But she would ask Jesus to help her to overcome that displeasure. And so that sister, in the testimony, said, Therese of the Child Jesus, like me over all the sisters. She didn't know that she was the cause of pain for Therese of the Child Jesus. But she never showed to the sister how displeasing was she to her. There were flaws in Therese. Kaya nga sabi niya, if I can commit all the sins of the world, I will not be discouraged. I will run to Jesus. This is the science of love. And what is the science of love? It is not because you can prove to God, you can prove to Jesus, ilang taon na ako dito sa parokya, ha? Ang dami ko na naibigay dito, ha? No, my dear friends, the rest of the Child Jesus teaches us a basic disposition. What is that basic disposition? And this is also the anchor of the science of love, confidence. And confidence alone. The rest would summarize our teaching. Confidence and love. This is the little way. Confidence and love. Therese was not swimming in consolation. You will read that also in manuscript C. Mother, I am not swimming in consolation. In fact, I am in desolation. You know, months before Therese of the Child Jesus died, she wrote a letter to one of to her sister, Celine. And she was describing what is the status of her spiritual life at that time. And she took the picture of a dark tunnel. A dark tunnel. She was passing through a dark tunnel. And everything seemed to be so long and no end in that dark tunnel. And you see, ito, pag binabasa ko yung sulat na yun, kinikilabutan ako. Kasi, during the last months of the life of Therese was the darkest. She would hear the devil whispering to her every day. Every day, ha? The devil whispering to her, there is no heaven. Your life is useless. Niremontakin mo naman, 15 years old ka pa lang, dinibot mo na ang buhay mo into religious life, and the devil will just suggest to you, there is no heaven. Your life as a religious is useless. Lahat ng pagsisikap niya and the devil was, and every night, she would hear that from the devil. This was her letter to her sister Celine. The dark night of her soul. Alam niyo, recently in Lisieux, dun sa kanyang selda, dun sa kanyang cell, they discovered one thing. You know what? Doon sa wall, doon sa pader ng kanyang, tabi ng kanyang kama, nung bago siya ibaba sa infirmary, doon sa tabi ng kanyang kama, yung wall, untypical of a madre. Hindi ito gawin ng mga madre. Ang mga madre malilinis, maaayos. You know what they discovered? On her wall, graffitis. She was writing with her finger on the wall. While she would be hearing the devil telling her, there is no God. Everything is useless. Nothing. Everything that you have worked on, nothing. She would be writing on the wall as she would hear from the devil. She would be writing on the wall, Je t'aime, O Jésus. I love you, Jesus. With her finger as a profession of faith. They discovered that recently in her cell. You have been working in the church. How many years already? I am a priest of 37 years already. Aminin natin, hindi naman laging Panginoong Jesus. There are times you doubt. There are times you ask yourself, saan ba pupunta ito? Laging may meeting, wala naman nangyayari. Ang daming proyekto. We ask questions. Therese experienced the doubt of faith. It was not perfect. Not everything was clear to her. Matakin niyo yun. Susulat niya sa, kasi kahoy yung pader. Susulat niya sa kanyang kuko, I love you, Jesus. First, this is the science of love. It is founded, rooted on confidence. And confidence is not because you can explain everything. Oh, kayo, naglilingkod kayo sa simbahan. Hindi naman lahat ng nangyayari sa buhay ninyo, may papaliwanag ninyo. Sabi sa akin ng isang naglilingkod sa simbahan, sabi niya, Father, kung kailan ako naglingkod sa simbahan, tsaka naman ako inulan ng problema. Come. Therese passed through the dark tunnel. When you are confronted with difficulties, saan tayo kumakapit? May tatandaan ko ito, may isang batang sakristan sa Pampanga, 10 years old. Every day, nagsilingkod sa misa. Naglilingkod sa misa. Pero meron kasi siyang heart condition. For some years, very faithfully, and he was happy serving at Mass. And one day, he was rushed to the hospital dahil dun sa heart condition. Nung binisita namin yung bata, sabi niya, kasi medyo malala yung sitwasyon niya. Sabi ng bata, Father, pagdasalin niyo naman ako para makapag-serve ulit ako. Para makapag-serve ulit ako. Ako, talaga akong, para akong gusto kong matunaw itong batang ito. Talagang yung paglilingkod niya kay Kristo. Kahit na nasa difficulties siya. And few days after that, he died. Therese, please do not forget that. More than anything else, what should stand out in our following of Therese is the science of love. And that is based on the gospel. God has loved us first. Pag hindi kayo dito nagsimula, ang buhay ninyo bilang Kristiyano, ang buhay ko bilang pare, parusa. Di ba? Kayo, naranasan nyo to. I am sure, naranasan nyo to. Nang kayo ay naanti sa tawag ng Diyos, ang unang-unang, hindi naman ang unang-unang sinasabi, ang unang-unang pinaparanas sa atin ng Diyos ay yung pag-ibig niya. At dahil dito sa pag-ibig niyang to, nagtatanong tayo, anong pwede kong gawin? Anong gagawin ko para sa iyo? Pero ito ay bunga. This is the fruit of that experience of love. If it is not the experience of love, and you just say, Lord, what can I do? The succeeding episodes would just be punishment for you. Tatandaan niyo yung, ito binabasa natin ito lagi kapag Feast Day of Saint Therese, based on the letter of Paul to the Corinthians. I have found my vocation in the church, and my vocation is love. Di ba? Familiar kayo dyan, no? You know, this is true. I have found my vocation, and everything is dependent on love. If the martyrs would stop loving, their blood will be useless. If the prophets would stop loving, their prophecies are useless. If apostles would stop loving, their evangelization would be useless. Love is everything. And when love is not present, everything becomes useless. Today, we celebrate Valentine's Day. We are not celebrating it. I thank you for coming to hear St. Therese message of science of love. Because I know that all your works in the church are founded on this. And without this, helping your parish priest, helping the church will just be expenses. Katulad dyan, di ba? Ito, nasabihin natin, pagkatapos kasi nung dineclare ni St. Therese na, I have found my vocation, and my vocation is love. Ang sumunod doon, I would like to be a priest. I would like to be a missionary. I would like to be a prophet. I would like, and sabi niya, and I would like to go all over the world, in all times and in all places. Pag pinabasa yun, oo, naman ito. Pero kayo, yung mga nanay dito, yung mga lola dito, naligawan kayo, di ba? Nung niligawan kayo, kapag sinabi sa inyo, mahal kita, anong kasunod? At lalamuyin ko ang pinakamalalim na dagat. Tatawirin ko ang 7 bundok. Makarating lang sa iyo. Di ba? Pag nagmamahal ka, talaga naman you explode. And that is the experience of Therese in that chapter of the story of the soul. I have found my vocation, and my vocation is love. And because of this, she wanted to be everything in the church, not for just today, but for all times, not just in France, but in all the world. She is in love, and that's why she could be everything. Pagka kayo nanghihina na kayo sa paglilingkod ninyo at pag-ibig nyo kay Jesus, nawawala na yung zest. It's because love is becoming cold. Di ba? Kapag nililigawan, lahat ibibigay. Kahit na mahal pa niyang roses na yan ngayon, kahit 700 pa isa niyan, bibili kita ng isang truck. Pero pag naikasal na at nanlamig na yung pag-ibig, sasabihin ng lalaki doon sa babae, Dear, pakitimpla naman ng kape. Ano sasabihin ng babae? Wala ka bang kamay? Pag naglamig ang pag-ibig, makinig, pag naglamig ang pag-ibig, kahit na yung maliit na bagay, ang bigat-bigat. Pero kapag may pag-ibig, kahit na yung napakalaki na paggagaan. This is what Therese is telling us in the science of love. And that's why she could burst into that. I have found my vocation, and my vocation is love. And I can be everything in the church because I am love. Ito yung panalangin natin, dito tayo magsimula. Ito, lagi ako natatawa dito kapag naririnig ko na sa misa, sisimula na sa offertory, aawin nila, kunin mo, O Diyos, at tanggapin mo ang aking kalayaan, ang aking kalooban, ang isip at gunita ko, lahat ng hawak ko, lahat ng loob ko, lahat ay aking alay sa iyo. Pag inaawin niyo yan, magdalawang isip kayo, ha? Magdalawang isip kayo, bakit? Sinasabi niyo sa Diyos, kunin mo lahat, lahat, huwag kang magtira sa akin. Ewan ko kung saan kayo dadamputin. Pero alam ng Diyos, nagbibiro lang kayo. Kaya hindi niya tinutotoo ito. Kasi kung tututuhanin ng Diyos yan, minamahal ko mga kapatid, this is what Therese is telling us. I have found my vocation, and my vocation is love. Dito tayo lahat nagsisimula. Kung nagsisimula kayo sa inyong paglilingkod at sa inyong buhay Kristiyano at sa inyong buhay spiritual, from somewhere else, you would not last. Kahit kami mga pari, kung hindi sa pag-ibig kay Jesus, ang daling manghinawa, ang daling magalit sa mga parokyano. Mukhang may sumbong niyo ako, sarakol ito eh. Sabi sa akin ng mga pare, walang pobre sa parokya mo. Doon sa chaplaincy ko, dahil rakol. There are no poor in your community. Sabi ko, anong walang poor? Ang daming ang poor at hearing, poor at understanding, poor at forgiveness in forgiving. Ang daming poor. See, when we do not start from it. That's why, gusto ko, sana, if there is anything that Therese has helped me to understand in my Christian life and in my priestly life, what is the foundation? And everything starts from here. Kung hindi diyan, parusa ang buhay ninyo bilang Christian. Ang daming bawal, ang daming hinihinging sakripisyo. And that's why we pray to Therese to teach us discover the science of love. And that's why, for Therese, even the smallest things, she would not deprive herself of offering to her. Di ba? Yung little things that we now always associate with Therese. Ito yung sa point niya, yung throwing petals. Yung petals ng roses are the little things that would make Jesus happy. Yung sa language ni Therese. Ang ganda din. Kasi inaawit nyo dito yung ang mabuhay sa pag-ibig. That is an echo of that science of love. Yun sa poem niya na, vivre d'amour, to live of love, ang mabuhay sa pag-ibig. No? That summarizes the science of love. Ang mabuhay sa pag-ibig ay pagbibigay na di natatatya ng halagang. So, this is what Therese is teaching us. It is how that is the foundation of our life. And if you do not have this, something is greatly missing in our life as Christians. So, Therese is great because of this greatness of love. She is a doctor of the church because love cannot be out-fashioned. Ang daming fashion sa simbahan, no? They come and go. But love cannot be out-fashioned. That's why she is a doctor of the church. Okay? Mukhang nahihirapan na kayo. Okay lang po. Thank you. Mukhang. Now, I just tried to summarize to you the life of Therese, the salient points in the life of Therese, and then we entered into the reflection of the heart, the meat of the doctrine of Therese, the science of love. And this would help us to understand if we stand on this, the teaching of Therese, the doctrine of Therese. You will see that her doctrine is not contrary to the gospel. It makes the gospel alive today. No? So, what would be the consequences of this? Number one, the value of prayer in our life. You cannot remain in love if you do not pray. In love of Jesus and of the church. Bakit marami tayong problema sa simbahan? Kasi hindi naman talaga nagdadasal yung karamihan. Kaya kapag nag-uusap-usap tayo, ang nananaig yung sarili. Hindi yung ibig ni Jesus. Kasi kung lahat tayo tunay na nagdarasal, iisa ang pakikinggan natin, hindi yung sarili. That's why, the first thing that is a consequence of this science of love is the value of prayer. And I hope in this national shrine, prayer is not an extra or addition. It is the root of everything that you do in this national shrine. But what is prayer? Prayer is not just saying things. Prayer is a relationship. This is what Therese teaches us. It is a sigh. It is a glance of love. It is a relationship. Kasi akala natin, ang prayer is when we say the rosary. All of these are helps. But that is not yet prayer. Prayer is a relationship. That's why when Jesus was asked, Lord, teach us how to pray. He was asked in Luke chapter 11, when he was asked by his disciples, Lord, teach us how to pray. Jesus began this, when you pray, our Father. And what is Father? Father is relationship. He is Father, and we are children. That's why the first thing in prayer is relationship. Even outside of the church, even outside of the prayers time, we are related to God. That's why I told you of presence. What is presence? Hindi naman yan tulad yan ng gadgets ninyo. You turn on, you turn off. Andyan, wala. Hindi. God's presence is continuous. Mantakin ninyo. If just a single moment in your life, God is not present, where will you be? Where will I be? Our Father. And that's why Jesus taught this. And Jesus died for that, huh? You remember? During the trial of Jesus, what was one of the accusations against Jesus? The elders and the Jewish authorities, religious authorities, told the Herod, he claimed God, Father, and therefore he blasphemed. One of the accusations of Jesus is that he made God Father. And that was for the Jewish people abominable. God cannot be equal with us. And that's why they don't even call God with a name. They always avoid the name, Yahweh. That's why yung songs natin ngayon ng Yahweh, I know you. That is forbidden. Because in respect to the Jewish people, they do not even mention the name Yahweh. Because when you mention the name Yahweh, you are making God somebody whom you control. Because, like for example, when I say, Father Noel, when I talk to him and I address him, he will, di ba? Lilingon siya sa akin. Kaya nga, di ba? Ayan, tawagin na lang natin sa pangalang ganyan. At pag tinawag mo, lilingon, ibig sabihin, may power ka sa kanya. That's why the Jewish people do not call God even with a name, God, Yahweh. And that's why they call him Adonai. What is Adonai? It is not the name of God. It is a title, Lord. It is a title. They don't call. And Jesus called God Abba. What is Abba? It is an endearing title of a father. When you call your tatay, tatay, o kaya papa, o kaya daddy, that is Abba. It is an endearing call, appellation of the father. It is not father. When he says, Emon, pater Emon, he was talking of God not only as father in general. No, he's teaching us to call daddy, our tatay. And for the Jewish people, that was scandalous. A consequence of the science of love is to develop the presence of God all throughout. That's why Therese would offer everything to Christ and to the Father because of the enduring presence in her life, even in the most difficult moments. Number 2, consequence of the science of love is, as I told you, aside from prayer, is to do everything with utmost love for God. Teacher ka ba? Yung pagtuturo mo as an act of love. Pari ako, pagkukumpisal, pagmimisa, preaching, an act of love. Alam niyo, kung si Saint Therese siguro buhay ngayon, biblical scholar si Saint Therese. Biblical scholar. Grabe yung kanyang biblical citation sa Story of a Soul. Grabe. And at that time, sabi ko sa inyo kanina, they were forbidden to read and to own a Bible at that time. No? Pero, how naturally she would be quoting from the Bible. So prayer, everything that is in us. There is nothing that cannot be offered to God. Even your sacrifices, your pains, and everything. And please do not waste your pains and sufferings. Meron akong dinadala ng komunyon, isang elderly, no? Pag Sunday, sabi niya, Father, every week, talaga naman kung ano-ano yung nararamdaman niyang sakit. Sabi niya, Father, ganyan, nagre-reklamo siya sa akin. Sabi ko, wala po na tayong magagawa. And the only thing that you can do is to offer this to Jesus and tonight everything so that this will effect conversion to your children or to people who need your prayer. And the third is, consequence of the science of love is to see yourself in the church and of the church. The rest of the child Jesus promised, and you will see this when she made her profession, I came to Carmel to to pray for sinners and to pray for priests. Why? She saw herself in the church and of the church. To pray for priests, because she knew well, if she would pray for priests, the priest would affect many in his evangelization. And that's why to pray for priests is to build up the church. And to pray for sinners. That includes all of us. Meron ako narinig na isang complaint, sabi niya, Father, bakit hindi na lang patayin ng Diyos lahat ng mga makasalanan? Yan mga sa corruption, sa flood control. Bakit hindi na lang patayin ng Diyos sa isang araw? Lahat sila wala na. Sabi ko doon sa nagko-complain, mag-ingat ka. Baka mabuwag ka. Baka mabuwag ka. Kasi in one way or another, we have our own contribution to. So, I leave you at that, and the three consequences of the silence of love of Therese. Pero, please, merong, I do not know if you're aware of this, no? They have retranslated the story of a soul into Tagalog. And that it would be good if you can read this, no? This is done by a member of the Notre Dame de Vie, and there was an original, there was a first edition in Tagalog, but they needed to re-edit it, and so I hope you can read. You can read this or the English, or if you want the French, l'histoire Genaro. L'histoire Genaro. So I think I have shared to you a very good friend of mine who has guided me from seminary until now, and I owe a lot to her in my priestly life. And I have shared to you, I hope that I have made justice to Saint Therese by offering to you her teaching and her life. I hope that I have been of help to you to be closer also to Therese. So thank you.